went to the Nassau County Police Department, and I got there early. That's kind of my style. And it was a beautiful day. So I set up all my computer equipment to do my presentation, and Ray walked in just a little bit before 9 and said, "Kevin, a plane hit the building." And I said, "A big plane or a small plane?" And he said, "A big plane." And I started to pack up my computer equipment right away.
At the time the towers fell, I was a trooper working out of SP Cobleskill, and at the time I was at our driver training facility, and just prior to the recruits and other instructors getting there, I was sitting in the car listening to the radio, probably finishing up a cup of coffee, and one of the other instructors who was sitting next to me had heard on the radio that a plane had hit one of the towers in New York City. And you know, I really didn't think anything of it. I assumed it was a small single-engine plane that would have done very little damage to the building. But you know, I made some assumptions that later on that day I found out were misassumptions, so to speak.
My name is Mike Hartzell. I'm currently the Schoharie County Director of Emergency Services. During the World Trade Center in 2001, I was a first sergeant in the United States Army on the 2nd Weapons of Mass Destruction Civil Support Team. In 2001 at the World Trade Center, when the World Trade Center happened, I remember that day vividly. I was at the Stratton VA. We were doing a capabilities demonstration. So I remember that morning, I remember the commander calling me. I was over there and he said, "Hey, First Sergeant, we just had a plane fly into the World Trade Center." I said, "What do you think it is, sir?" And he's like, "I'm not sure. Let me watch the news and check, and I'll call you right back." And about 2 seconds later, my phone rang, and he said, "Get back here with your guys now." We headed back to the office. We got a quick safety brief, and 62 minutes after the first plane hit, we were on our way to the World Trade Center.
I was watching television that morning and saw the towers getting hit. My first impression was to say out loud, and I was by myself, "We're at war." The next thing I did was I packed a bag and left for the firehouse. It didn't come until several days later that we got an assignment to spend 24 hours in New York City. A crew of 6 went with Cobleskill Rescue. The captain was Sean McGovern, paramedic Bill Averill and Janie Russell, Lucille Compton, Harold Ray, and I went down there, split into 2 teams, 3 each, to spend 12-hour shifts at Ground Zero.
So as I'm going down there, I see all the people coming out of the Trade Center walking up on the FDR Drive on the sidewalk, leaving through the Battery Park and the backside of the Financial Center. And they were just covered in white dust. So when I pulled into One Police Plaza, the buildings had just collapsed. One of the buildings had just collapsed. And the papers were flying all over, and there's dust in the air. You could hardly see anything. And during that time, what we were trying to do at One Police Plaza is a couple things. Our job with the State Emergency Management Office, we are never in charge. We are resource brokers. We coordinate state resources in time of emergency. So the next effort we had is we knew that the One Police Plaza 8th floor command post was not going to be good for this operation because of the number of agencies involved. So we decided to go to the New York City Police Academy. So we got established there, and that's when we had the first meeting with the mayor and the governor and all the city deputy mayors and his council about what was transpiring, what we needed to do to get organized. So we sat down and we come up with a plan. Ironically, after I was supposed to give this talk on Tuesday, September 11th, I was supposed to do a pod exercise, that's a points of distribution exercise, at Pier 92, which is a shipping pier over on the West Side Highway. So we sat down and we brainstormed, we said, why don't we use that as our new operations center? So what we did is, a few of us were asked to go over and walk through and scope out how we were going to make this pier, which had nothing in it, no electricity, very little electricity, phones, nothing in it. It was just empty pier. And so we went downstairs and they said to me, Kevin, you got to get going. We got to go over here and put eyes on this place and make a decision on what needs to be done as far as making this operational. So I came down and I said, well, where's the emergency services vehicle? I swear to God, something out of, Clint Eastwood movie or something. Here comes a bus. The police officer stops the bus, tells everybody to get off the bus and catch the next bus through, and that we're going to take this bus through Ground Zero to Pier 92 on the west side. And sure enough, the police officer says to the driver, either you drive it or I'm going to drive it, but we're taking this bus. And off we go.
We got there that afternoon and went to work with NYPD ESU for the first day. We did the first recon of the World Trade Center for Chem Biorad. There was initial thoughts there was a radiological device on one of the planes. So that's what we were really looking for in the rubble, was to see if there was any radiation that could hurt first responders. One of my other thoughts was when we first got to New York City, I remember, like I said, getting an escort from NYPD, and as you went into the city, there were signs everywhere. It says, New York City is closed. And I thought that was interesting, this big bustling city, and now you got signs saying closed. Really, our role changed from then, from the rubble pile to New York City, going everywhere in New York City, from subways to train stations. Any ventilation system where they thought there could be a biological or chemical attack, we were there for probably the next 8 months.
I stood at Ground Zero on September 12th at 3:30 in the morning. And when we were sent there, we were initially sent there just to assist New York City Police Department. Well, walking in to the site, we came up through a tunnel, and then we walked in, and I can just remember the sight of papers just everywhere. So we followed the trail to where we were needed, which was right at the pile, and we were standing next to a building that looked like it was about to collapse. And on that day, I wasn't sure if this is where this was going to be our last day, and this is where it was going to happen, or what was going to happen on that evening. But that was my first introduction to being at Ground Zero.
At that point, we split up. Sean McGovern, Bill Averill, and Lucille took the first watch, and the rest of my crew, we went to the hospital ship Comfort, where we checked in and were given bunks and tried to get some sleep for our shift the next morning. We found the ambulance, relieved the crew, and they went to the Comfort to have some sleep after their watch. We were immediately given orders to go to Battery Park in Lower Manhattan and report to a New York City EMS captain. We were there for a short period of time, and then were told to go to Liberty and Church Street, right on the corner of what had been the World Trade Center, or now Ground Zero. And that's where we spent our whole tour, was there at that location.
Hit Pier 92, there's nothing in the pier, and within 36 hours we were up and running with 250 stations, with all sorts of equipment between radios, copiers, computer systems. Remember, fax machines were still back in those days, but we set it all up, and within 36 hours, an amazing part to me was it all worked. But you know, I always said it was the day America gave. So people donated stuff, and there was so many donations that it was hard to get your hands around it. It was pretty a massive type of operations. But the key was you bring that in because we call it one-stop shopping. It's an area where you can coordinate quickly without having to get on the phone. You simply can get up and walk over and talk to the police if there's an issue that you have to deal with. So, you know, it was really, to me, amazing, 24/7, for almost a year operation.
Ended up doing the Yankee Stadium in 2001, the game where President Bush came. Actually, it was interesting. I went over every morning around 11 o'clock in the morning and did the sweep of Yankee Stadium for Ken Bio and Rad. Actually did the booth right outside Steinbrenner's office where President George Bush went.
And then I probably had a couple weeks break in there. And on one of my returns, there was a point where Ground Zero had been opened up a little bit, and the families were surviving family members were brought to the site to see. And I was part of the contingent that escorted the families and just made sure they got from, I think it was one of the piers they started on, and it was a boat, and then we got them to Ground Zero safely, and then back. And that was that part. It was rewarding, but also to see, you know, what the family members were going through. That was tough. It was hard to watch.
The location really. We stood by while the construction crews and the fire crews were working on what was called at that point the pile. It was what was left of the World Trade Center. Probably the most notable scene at that point was the facade of the World Trade Center, part of it still standing up, not willing to come down.
mean, I could go on and on for hours of the things that are so unusual they had to coordinate. Like, they had to bring a 100-ton crane to the site. So this 100-ton crane, it had to be moved from Georgia, and it had to be moved, it had to be taken apart. It took them a week to put the crane up, and it was the tallest crane on site. I get a call from the guy this Chief Kelly again, from the New York City Police Department, and they had just set the crane up. And the ironic part about the person who's the crane operator, his father was the crane operator when they built the World Trade Center. So here's this kid that's taken apart the World Trade Center in a crane that his father worked on to build the World Trade Center. So this Chief Kelly comes up to me and he goes, "Hey, Neary, do you know where I can get a New York State flag?" And I said, "Yeah, I have a New York State flag in my car from the village of Richmondville." So they took the New York State flag and they put it on the highest crane down there. But I heard later that the Union Hall, when Jimmy Shea from Lake Placid won I believe the luge or something, I don't remember exactly what it was, he won a gold medal, that Governor Pataki gave him that flag.
We were really prepared that day for a terrorist attack, and I don't think the emotion kind of set in. It took several days and maybe even several years. I mean, I have a lot of vivid images in my head on the rubble pile and seeing on the wall it says "morgue this way" and poignant, and really took me back was the fire trucks that were crushed. And I remember walking by, it had to be the first or second day, walking by a BMW, and this beautiful BMW sitting there covered in dust, and I remember looking at one of my soldiers going, "Why would someone leave their car there?" Then it sets in and goes, well, that person's probably never coming back for that car.
Back at the ambulance, a couple of times we were treating people who would come with, take their gloves off. They had blisters. We would clean them off, bandage them up, and they were ready to go back on to work again. That was our day, was basically at the ambulance, making sure that whenever we were needed, we were right there.
Things I wanted to say about my experience at during 9/11 was I had probably about 20 years on at the time. In a 20-year career, it was one of the worst experiences of my career, but it was also one of the greatest. And when I say greatest, I saw people from New York City and the country coming together to for a human cause. And you know, I don't know if I've seen that since.
So when that building went down, everything was pulverized. So it's like dust. So it's like walking through 6 inches of snow. But what people don't realize is that all that dust ended up on tops of buildings. So the dust got into the HVAC systems, the dust actually got inside the buildings, which was hazardous. And then on top of the building, you had all this silt, it was concrete and other dust that were on top of the building, like a foot. And then we were going to have rain. So the problem was, if we have rain, that's going to turn to concrete. So along the other missions you had to do is to figure out how we're going to get this dust all on top of the buildings, which was, that was quite an undertaking. So we needed to control the site to limit the exposures to dust and chemicals on the site. So every morning at 7 o'clock, we would go to Stuyvesant High School by Battery Park City, and we would have a safety brief. And the issue was that some of the responders were not wearing the appropriate personal protective equipment. I think they call them MD85s, MD90s, or whatever they are, but they're a special fit with canisters. The rescue workers would take them off and throw them on the ground. So we had a major come up, and the major says to me, you know, Kevin, I'm having all my guards people pick up all these masks, and I'm bringing them back to Stuyvesant Schools where Pesh and OSHA were there trying to face fit everybody. So I said, what's the point? She said, because they can be cleaned and new canisters can be put on them and bagged, and we can reuse them instead of, you know, constantly ordering stuff and people wearing dirty masks. And I said, wow, how did you know this? And she said, I work for GE, and I'm an environmental health scientist for GE, and I do this every day. I'm like, wow.
It was time to eat. We got relieved, and one of the storefronts had been taken over as a cafeteria. So we didn't have to go very far, right on Liberty Street, just shy of Engine 10 and Ladder 10 was the cafeteria. And Janie and Harold and I left to walk down there, and as we were walking along, I caught fire flaming up on my left eye, and I turned, and it was a New York City policeman in the shadows lighting a cigarette. And he was all by himself, which bothered me because you found that everybody was working at least in pairs or groups. Nobody was working by themselves. And he was just standing there. So I told the crew that I was with, I'll catch up with you when we get something to eat. And I peeled off and I went over to the police officer. When I was there, I put my arm around him and I said to him, you're looking mighty down. His head was hanging down. I said, there's a lot of people here for you. And he goes, you don't understand. My partner's out there, pointing to the pile. He didn't know where his partner was. His partner was missing. Then he said, and nobody knows about it. Nobody cares. So I said to him, that's why we're here. That's why I'm here from Cobleskill. That's why all these people are here. That's why everybody in the United States is watching here to find out what's going on and what's happening, to stand with you. And it's not only the United States, it's worldwide. Everybody is standing with you. Shortly after that, 5 or 6 New York City policemen came walking by, called to him, and said, come on, we're getting something to eat. So the two of us walked out. I hooked up with his sergeant, and I said to him, I said, watch him. He was standing here all by himself. I said, he shouldn't be by himself. He's really down. And the sergeant thanked me, and we went on to get something to eat.
You know, we forget that all these leaders are human beings. You know, on Pier 92, a lot of celebrities came in. We had movie stars and, you know, the president of France, the premier from, or the prime minister of Switzerland. And people don't realize, even with governors and mayors, they have emotions too. And we're called upon in these crises to address families, and they do it. They don't do it like with, you know, here I'm emotional about it. They get up there and do things. I'm always amazed about how strong they are to do it. But they realize their mission is to bring comfort to the families and to reassure the families that everything we can do for New York State or everything we can do for the city of New York, we're going to do. I know they're movie stars and they're baseball players and celebrities and all that, but these are, underneath all that, they're people. And so a lot of times they're asked to go in and talk to kids. The New York Yankees baseball team, in the middle of playoffs and everything, because that wasn't important to them, obviously, came in and talked to all the emergency services kids that lost somebody from their family. So, I mean, those are things you don't realize, that the number of people that came in that shook our hands and thanked us for what we were doing. But the most reward for that, you know, it's nice the celebrities did it. It was nice that Giuliani went around every day and talked to us. Those are nice. But what I think about is just the regular, ordinary people that I met on the street. The people who I would love to meet again or see again. So when I came home, my daughter was a junior. I think she was a junior in school. And she said, hey, Dad, you know, we want to know what we can do to help, you know, the kids in New York City, which was really cool. I said, well, Megan, you know, Schoharie County is a farm community. So I'll tell you what if the kids from the schools can't go to Long Island to pick pumpkins, so why don't we, you know, think about sending pumpkins to New York? So she said, great idea. I said, but here's what we got to do. We got to make sure all schools are involved. So this is not a Cobleskill, Richmondville thing. It's Jefferson, Gilboa, Sharon Smith. Everybody has to be involved. It can't be one school. It's got to be Schoharie County. So I went to the farm meeting, which was up at the college, and I told them what we thought about doing. And there was a guy by the name of Adams there, him and his wife. He had a trucking business at the time. So they said, well, how many pumpkins do you want, Neary? I said, you know, why don't we do 5,000 pumpkins? Make sure to come from all over the county. You know, they can be donated. Well, lo and behold, these kids collected, painted, washed 45,000 pumpkins and shipped them to New York. Well, what happened was that I created my own crisis, because now they're in New York, how are you going to distribute them? So I was getting a lot of ribbon about this, about the mayor and his pumpkin patrol. We finally figured out that we're going to distribute these pumpkins because a lady came up to me who I had never met before. She said, I know the deputy commissioner for Giuliani's Board of Education. And so he came up to me and he said, you've got these pumpkins? This is a great idea. I'm going to handle it. So then we went back to the schools and we got New York City Convention Center to donate a room, and we brought kids from Schoharie County, including my daughter. So here we go. We start out to deliver the pumpkins. First of all, he comes with his car, his city car, great big Ford, whatever it is, police car. We put the kids in a car, in the van, and I'm in the car with him, and we are going against traffic through the Canyon of Heroes. So anybody knows that, it's West Broadway. The traffic's coming at us, and we're going this way with lights and siren. I mean, the kids were like out of their mind. This is so cool. But we took them to schools, and we handed the pumpkins off to kids in schools. So now we get the pumpkins out of there, and they have one more pumpkin they want to give to Giuliani. So I take them into City Hall, along to the deputy mayor, and we go in there, and we go upstairs, and we say, you know, where's the mayor? We want him to have a picture with us. And the mayor is in a conference with the governors from Oklahoma and the governors from Colorado, because they had been through these types of events, and he was looking for advice. So he said the mayor's not available. So we said, you know what, can we have a picture with the pumpkin on City Hall, on the steps? So we put the pumpkin up there, and we're sitting there getting ready for the picture, and lo and behold, who comes out the door but Giuliani? So Giuliani sees it, and he goes, what's going on here? Said, oh, Mayor, these kids collected pumpkins for the city kids and got one more. He said, okay, hold up my driver. He goes over there and stands with the kid and takes a picture with the pumpkins. I don't know whatever happened to the picture, because I'd love to see it. But, I mean, those are kind of like the cute moments that are there.
Initially going there, you know, we were charging down there as a team, thinking, all right, you know, we're going to take care of this, and that's what our job has been. You know, that's the job of a police officer, a trooper, is to go somewhere and then there's a problem, fix it, take care of it. So that, you know, at that point the adrenaline's high, and you know, we are ready to fix the problem. After getting there and seeing what was there, there was quite an adrenaline dump, and you know, the other emotion of helplessness, sadness, and not being able to fix this problem really set in. And you know, I could see it on the faces of my co-workers and other troopers, who are, you know, some of the toughest individuals I know, who would lay down their life for me and other people, to not be able to fix the problem.
Yeah, it did kind of change me a little bit, and like I said, little did I know, several years later I'd spent 13 months in Afghanistan, and even today, as my time as a soldier in combat, I still always think back to the World Trade Center and have vivid images of that first day. I remember I was there with Bernie Kirk from the Office of Fire Prevention personally for me, we pulled the first firefighter out there. And that was always, still to this day, is an emotional time for me around 9/11. Those memories of, you know, seeing the World Trade Center on the ground and being there on day one and pulling that first firefighter out, I still have vivid memories of that, and vivid memories of being on the rubble pile. Every September 11th, it kind of haunts me a little bit, probably more than my time in Afghanistan. And I think that's because, as a military person, you're supposed to go to war and do those things. But to have it happen on your home soil makes it that much tougher that innocent people died. It probably could have been preventable. So it always becomes a little bit more emotional for me around that time, you know, September 11th every year. So
then it was back down the West Side Highway to pick up the rest of the crew. Now, once we got them on board, and we went out of the zone, which was ground zero, traveling north on the West Side Highway, we started to see what looked like a commotion of some sort. Couldn't quite figure out what it was until we got right in the middle of it. But there were hundreds of people, both sides of the road in the median, with flags, posters, thanking us for having come down. And then it was just that long ride back up to Schoharie County that was actually pretty silent for 6 people that always have something to say.
When they call them 911, people don't care what uniform you're wearing. People don't care what vehicle you get out of. People want to know that, are you prepared to help me in time of emergency? What is it that you can do? And that's what our mission is. It's nothing more than that, is to be able to do that. We want to prevent them from happening. We want to make sure there's never another emergency. But on the other hand, we have to be prepared for that. And that's just our lives, and that's just what we do. We're not taught to say it's going to be okay. We're taught to say, what's the worst case scenario, and can we deal with this, and what do we need to do to prepare?